In the far stretch of the Orion verge, where drifting nebulae glowed like ancient embers in a sea of starlight, a lone human known as Leon traveled aboard a modest scout vessel assigned to chart mineral-rich asteroids, yet his mission took an unexpected turn when a fragile distress signal flickered across his console, a signal that trembled with urgency and belonged to a civilization his species had never met. As he followed the faint pulse of energy, he discovered a silvery craft badly damaged, its hull torn by plasma fire, and within its fading walls he found Myra, a young princess of the Seraline, people whose luminous skin shimmered with the color of sunrise and whose breath came faint and trembling while her guardians lay unconscious around her, and Leon, without hesitation, pulled her from the wreckage just moments before the vessel's ruptured core collapsed into itself in a cascade of burning light, carrying her carefully aboard his ship and beginning a desperate flight toward the nearest neutral outpost since hostile raiders still prowled the region hungry for prisoners and salvage. But Mira, even in weakness, tried to warn him that her enemies were not simple pirates, but a ruthless war clan known for hunting her royal line, and thus Leon prepared himself for pursuit, for he had already chosen to protect her, though he barely understood why. Perhaps because her quiet voice carried both fear and courage wrapped together in a way that stirred something deep within him, as though her survival mattered beyond all reason. And as the raiders emerged from the shadow of a fractured moon, Leon pushed his ship harder than it had ever flown, weaving through debris fields and streaks of hostile fire, while Myra struggled to stay conscious long enough to guide him toward a hidden jump gate known only to her ancestors. Yet the raiders closed in, and their weapons tore into the hull, leaving scorch marks that filled the cabin with acrid smoke. And as alarm screamed, Leon realized the only way to keep her alive was to engage them directly, so he armed his suit, sealed Mira within a protective capsule, and launched himself into the void, where drifting shards of metal caught the reflection of distant suns, and there, in the silent stretch between worlds, he fought the raider squad with nothing but determination, a pulse blade, and the stubborn resilience that had defined humanity since its earliest days. And the raiders underestimated him, for they believed humans were fragile compared to the heavy-muscled species of the Verge. Yet they learned quickly that humans possessed something far more dangerous, a will that refused to yield even when faced with overwhelming force. And though Leon's suit was torn again and again, and bright drops of red drifted from his wounds into the weightless dark, he pressed forward, driven not by glory, but by an instinct to protect life, especially the life he had saved moments earlier. And with a final surge he disabled the raider commander, sending the rest scattering into retreat before collapsing near his airlock, bleeding heavily, but relieved as Myra's capsule opened, and she reached out with trembling hands to help him, inside her soft glow dimming with worry as she whispered gratitude in her melodic tone. And once aboard, he set the final coordinates for her homeland, guided by her fading voice, until they slipped through the jump gate, where the colors of hyperspace twisted like ribbons drawn through an unseen loom, and emerged near the shining world of Seralia, with its crystal spires and floating gardens, drifting above serene oceans that sparkled like distant stars. And as Leon's battered ship limped toward the royal sanctuary, a fleet of elegant vessels surrounded them, not with hostility, but reverence, for Myra had used her last reserves of strength to send a coded message identifying her rescuer and protector. And when they landed upon a platform made of translucent stone, the palace healers rushed forward, taking Mira gently, while urging Leon to lie down as well, though he refused until he saw her safe behind shimmering doors, and only then did his legs finally give out, and darkness swept over him like a soft tide. And when he awoke, he found himself in a grand chamber where warm sunlight filtered through curtains that resembled strands of woven light, and beside him stood Myra. Her color returned, her posture regal, though her eyes still carried the warmth of someone who had shared a deep bond forged in danger. and she thanked him again, but said that another wished to speak with him. And soon the queen herself entered, a tall figure with a commanding presence, her attire flowing like living starlight, and her gaze sharp yet filled with an emotion he could not immediately understand. And she listened as Mira recounted every detail of her rescue, describing how Leon had risked his life against overwhelming odds, and how he had shed his own blood, with no promise of reward, no expectation of alliance, and no reason beyond compassion. And that Queen stepped closer, her expression shifting from solemnity to a profound recognition of awe. What his actions meant not just for her daughter, but for her entire people, for in a region filled with warfare and fracturing alliances, such sacrifice was rare, precious, and powerful. And she declared before all gathered attendants that Leon belonged now to Seralia, not as a prisoner or subject, but as one honored above all others, one whose courage bound him to the royal line for his protection of the princess had been an act of devotion that, in their culture, symbolized an ancient oath older than any treaty. And this declaration stunned Leon, yet the queen continued, stating that she herself would claim responsibility for him, offering shelter, honor, and a place within her court for, in Seraline tradition, the one who saves a royal life becomes forever entwined with the ruling family. And though Mira blushed at her mother's commanding tone, she stepped closer and spoke in human language to reassure him, saying that her people did not take freedom from those they honored. Rather, they uplifted them and welcomed them into kinship of the highest order. And Leon, realizing that refusal would bring confusion or offense, but also sensing the sincerity in Myra's eyes, accepted her hand, allowing her to guide him through halls of shimmering light, where he was greeted not as an outsider, but as a savior. And throughout the following days, he learned much of their world, walking through floating gardens where strange birds sang harmonies unlike anything on earth, and training with the guardians who taught him their graceful combat, forms which he adapted with human tenacity, surprising even the seasoned warriors. And Mira often accompanied him, showing him the ancient archives where hollow crystals held centuries of history, stories of triumph and sorrow, woven together like rivers, flowing through time. And as they spent more hours together, Myra's admiration for him grew, not born of obligation, but of genuine connection, for she saw not only a warrior, but a being of empathy, who carried the burden of sacrifice with quiet humility. And Leon, too, found himself drawn to her presence, not for her royal status, but for her spirit, her curiosity, her resilience in the face of danger, and the unspoken understanding that had formed between them in the vacuum of space. And though he tried to ignore the pull of emotion, he could not deny the way her luminous smile eased the ache of old wounds, or the way her laughter brightened the vast palace corridors. And the queen, observing their quiet closeness, felt both relief and pride for her choice to declare Leon part of her realm, for she saw in him something rare, a bridge between peoples that could reshape alliances across the verge. And her confidence proved justified when negotiations began between Seralia and nearby human colonies, who saw in Leon's tale more than an adventure. They saw a testament to the power of unity and courage. And though Leon faced new challenges, adjusting to royal duties, learning cultural ceremonies, and navigating the subtleties of palace politics, he approached each day with the same determination that had guided him in battle, carrying himself with a mix of humility and strength that inspired those around him. And Myra often stood at his side, guiding him gently, teaching him customs, correcting him with soft smiles, and celebrating each small victory as he adapted to his new role. And in time, Leon realized that his journey had carried him far beyond the boundaries of the scout vessel he once called home, for he had not only saved a princess, he had become part of a world rich with beauty and meaning, a world that embraced him not for what he was born, as but for what he chose to be. And the queen, seeing how deeply he cared for her daughter, how fiercely he had protected Her and how naturally he had found his place within their palace reaffirmed her earlier declaration with even greater ceremony, presenting him before the High Council and proclaiming him a guardian, bonded to the royal line and this honor carved. His name into Cerulean history, linking it forever with the day he shed his blood in the void to save Mira, and the day the queen declared that such courage could not stand alone, but must be cherished, nurtured, and woven into the fabric of their future as both a symbol of unity and a promise to the generations yet to come.